The wrench slipped from Amos Carter's calloused fingers, clattering against the concrete floor of his cramped garage. He froze, the sound echoing like a gunshot in the pre-dawn stillness of Millville, Ohio. At 53, Amos was no stranger to sleepless nights, but this one felt different. The legendary 1967 Shelby Mustang GT500 sat before him, its engine in pieces, a puzzle no one else in town dared touch. Its owner, a woman he'd never met, had left it with a note. "Fix it. I'll pay whatever it costs." Amos wiped sweat from his brow, his heart heavy with doubt. He wasn't just a poor mechanic, he was a man running out of time. Amos had grown up in Millville, a speck of a town where dreams rusted faster than old cars. His garage, Carter's Auto, was a relic of his father's ambition, now barely solvent. Bills piled up on the counter, stamped with red ink, past due. His wife, Clara, had passed 2 years ago, and their only son, Jake, had moved to Columbus, chasing a life Amos couldn't afford to give him. The garage was all he had left, a sanctuary of grease and grit where he poured his grief into every bolt he tightened. But this Mustang? It was a beast a legend whispered about in car circles, worth more than his entire life's savings. Why had its owner trusted him? The story began 3 days earlier when a tow truck dropped the car off at midnight. Amos had been closing up, the radio playing a staticky Merle Haggard tune, when the driver handed him the keys and the note. The Mustang's midnight blue paint gleamed under the streetlight, but its engine wouldn't turn over. "Lady said you're the guy," the driver muttered before leaving. Amos had laughed bitterly. Him? The guy who couldn't afford new tires for his own truck? But something about the car called to him, like a challenge from a life he'd never lived. He worked through the first night, then the second, fueled by black coffee and stubborn pride. The engine was a mess, worn gaskets, a cracked manifold, and a carburetor that looked like it had been through a war. Amos didn't have the parts, so he improvised. He machined a new gasket from scrap metal, rewired the ignition by hand, and scavenged a fuel pump from a junkyard Chevy. Every fix was a gamble, but he couldn't stop. This car wasn't just a job, it was a lifeline, a chance to prove he was more than a failure clinging to a dying town. By the third night, exhaustion blurred his vision, but Amos was close. He tightened the last bolt, his hands trembling, and turned the key. The Mustang roared to life, its V8 growl shaking the garage walls. For the first time in years, Amos smiled. He didn't know who the owner was, but he imagined her driving this beast, wind in her hair, free in a way he'd never been. He cleaned his tools, wrote a modest invoice, $800, far less than the job deserved, and left a voicemail for the owner. "Car's ready. Come by when you can." The next morning, a sleek black SUV pulled up to the garage. A woman stepped out, maybe 60, with silver hair and eyes that seemed to see through him. She introduced herself as Evelyn Harper, and her presence felt out of place in Millville's dust and decay. Amos braced for her to haggle over the bill, but she didn't even glance at it. Instead, she walked to the Mustang, ran a hand along its hood, and asked, "You fixed this yourself?" "Yes, ma'am," Amos said, shifting uncomfortably. "Took some doing, but she runs like a dream now." Evelyn nodded, her gaze distant. "This car belonged to my husband, David. He was a racer, back in the day. Won races across the country in the Shelby. When he died last year, I couldn't bear to drive it. The engine gave out, and I thought it was gone for good." She paused, her voice softening. "Then I heard about you." Amos frowned. "Heard about me? From who?" "A friend in Columbus. Said you're the best mechanic no one's ever heard of. Said you'd treat this car like it was your own." Evelyn opened the Mustang's door, the leather interior gleaming. "You didn't just fix an engine, Amos. You brought a piece of David back to me." Amos's throat tightened. He muttered a thank you, unsure what to say. Evelyn handed him an envelope, heavier than it should have been. "Your payment," she said. He peeked inside, $10, $000 in cash, more money than he'd seen in years. "Ma'am, this is too much," he stammered. "The invoice was only keep it," she interrupted. "And I have a proposition." She pulled a business card from her purse, embossed with the logo of Harper Automotive, a high-end restoration company based in Detroit. "I own this. We build and restore classic cars for collectors worldwide. I need someone like you, someone who doesn't just fix cars, but understands their soul. Come work for me. Run my new shop. I'll give you a stake in the company." Amos's knees buckled. A stake in a company? Him, a nobody from Millville? He thought of Clara, who'd always believed he was meant for more. He thought of Jake, who hadn't called in months. I don't know what to say," he managed. "I've never left this town." Evelyn smiled, her eyes warm. "You don't have to decide today. But know this. You gave me back a piece of my heart. I want to give you a chance to rebuild yours." That night, Amos sat in the garage, the Mustang gone, the envelope of cash on the counter. He held Evelyn's card, its edges worn from his fidgeting. For years, he'd fixed things, cars, dreams, promises, only to watch them break again. But this was different. It wasn't just a job. It was a door to a life he'd never dared imagine. He picked up the phone and dialed Jake. "Son," he said when the voicemail beeped, "I've got a story to tell you. About a car and a woman and maybe a new start. Call me back, okay?" He hung up, tears in his eyes, and looked at the empty garage. For the first time in years, it didn't feel like an end. It felt like a beginning. The next morning, Amos taped a sign to the garage door, "Closed for now. Off to fix something bigger." He climbed into his truck, Evelyn's card tucked in his pocket, and drove toward Detroit, the sunrise painting the sky gold. He didn't know what lay ahead, but he knew one thing. Kindness had a way of turning broken engines into legends, and broken men into something more.